This podcast is brought to you by the AlmaMAC and Scientific Canada. It was recorded on the traditional territories shared between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Enjoy. I feel like I just butchered that again, even though
That's close enough.
we just had the conversation. Okay.
My research on light adaptation in the fish right now.
I'm sitting in a kiddie pool, actually. It's quite nice.
Oh, that would be great.
But it's not very professional. Hi, hello, and welcome to the show. Today is a particularly special episode of the AlmaMAC, and probably the most meta episode we've ever had. Today I'm joined by the inventor of the AlmaMAC, the once and future host, Sawayra. This is actually going to be a two-parter since we have so much to talk about, and today we're just going to talk about the show in general. How did she come up with it? What's the goal of the show? How has it evolved? You know, that kind of thing. As listeners may know, I inherited the show from Sawayra about a year ago, while she left to focus on a dual MD PhD program. I've had a blast working on the show, and I've really tried to take it to the next level. And today we're going to hear Sawayra talk about what the show means to us, why we think it serves an important role for up-and-coming researchers, and what we plan to do with it. But before we get into the interview, I was going to hold out on you until next week, but I'm too excited. I want to announce that Sawayra is coming back. Yes, that is right. Sawayra is in the process of tracking down some guests, recording some episodes, and, getting back into the swing of things. So, you might be wondering, does that mean I'm gone? No. I'm not leaving, and you're probably not going to hear less of me either. What I'm hoping to do is expand on the content that the AlmaMAC provides, and sort of build up my own little science media empire. I'm doing this over at scientificcanada.ca, and I'm hoping to just increase the type of stuff that we put out. Having both of us working together means that I'll have more time to put out different types of content as well. For example, we just had a humor article go up on Monday called "Twitch Streamer Awarded Full Professorship Begins Teaching Physics," and last week I announced that we had an article go up about how Canadians in the media can become polarized on certain technical topics. Things like vaccines or GMOs or things like that. So you can head over to scientificcanada.ca for that. And I don't know, without further ado, let's jump to the interview with Sawayra.
Oh.
Anyway, hello everybody and welcome to the show. I am your host, Adam, and today we have probably the most special episode we've ever had. We have we have a very special guest. Sawayra, hello.
Hello.
For those who know the history of the AlmaMAC, you'll know that Sawayra is I called you the owner and proprietor of the AlmaMAC in our little pre-interview, but what's a better term for this? Originator?
I would say Sawayra is a fellow co-host because Adam, along with Sean and Matt, you have done an incredible job taking the show over for, is it over a year now, I think?
I think we crossed the threshold.
Yeah.
It's been weird, though, because we haven't been in the studio for a full year.
Yes.
I don't think.
Yeah. But even with that, you folks still continued all the episodes and podcasts. But thank you for that little shout out. It's been just so wonderful on my end to see where the show has gone, and I think I'm along with other people really happy that it's continued.
Well, hey, you left it in a great spot. It was a great concept. I feel like we just sort of ran with it. So I feel like today might be a good opportunity to sort of reestablish what the idea of the AlmaMAC was from its inception, and that was a show run by grad students for grad students in the McMaster community. Grad students do research. It's not just these highly funded research scientists and profs and stuff. We're all doing stuff at all times. Grad life is an interesting life, and there's just tons of us doing cool things. So let's talk to these cool people. Is that the gist?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. And that was kind of my motivation to when I started this radio show. So I did my undergrad back at Western, and Western also had an on-campus radio station, and I was actually involved in doing on-campus radio there as well, but it was for a completely separate program. But I'm not gonna lie, I felt pretty cool, like walking into the radio station or like telling my friends, like, "Oh, I just got to do a radio show really quick," right? It's like you have to admit, it's kind of a well, we were talking previously too. Now everybody and their mother has a podcast, but I think radio to this day has this like really unique and special touch, I think. So I knew that I enjoyed doing that form of media, and it was really enjoyable for me. And actually at Western, they had, I wasn't involved in this, but they actually had a very similar program called Gradcast, where they interviewed grad students about their work. And I think that was also started up by a neuroscience graduate student, I believe. So when I came to Mac, the first thing I looked for when I was like thinking of what hobbies or extracurriculars I wanted to get started, I wanted to know if they had an on-campus radio station, and they did. And I kind of just let that sit in the back of my mind. And once I started grad school, you know how we have like, sometimes we have mini symposia or like those mini conferences, especially inside, well, I'm already forgetting the building names. This is what the pandemic does to you. The Health Sciences Library, you know, the glass wall.
The Sciences Library. Thode?
No, it's called the Health Sciences Library. There's like it's like the pavilion with the glass wall and the fancy photos.
Yeah.
So like, I think you and I might agree, those were like really good avenues to talk about your research, but I feel like you only get like those like 2-minute elevator pitches, right? Unless you go in and like dig further and question them. So I was kind of getting the sense and realizing that graduate students may not have as many opportunities to informally talk about their work in a really unique setting, particularly being questioned by a fellow grad student themselves. So I decided to pitch this idea of the AlmaMAC, which is this current radio show where I, at the time, a graduate student, interviewed fellow graduate students about their work, but also, as you mentioned in the beginning, about their hobbies, extracurriculars, maybe some advice they have for people listening who are interested in going to grad school. And thankfully got accepted. And I believe we had our first show in October of 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just been so great to see all the guests that have come through and like the little run-ins we had on campus, or you know how you have that like feeling of familiarity. It's like, I've seen that person before, and it's like, oh yeah, like we interviewed 2 years ago. How you been? So yeah.
So I feel like you probably told me you were at Western doing radio stuff before, but this it feels like news to me. I don't know. Did you know that I went to Western as well during the same period of time?
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Interesting to know that that you were at Western around the same time. That's cool.
CHRW, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Weird. But yeah, it's a really cool feeling to. It's much different from putting out a podcast. At least it feels like when you walk into a studio and you see all of that gear, and it's almost like a retro feeling. I don't know. The internet's everywhere, but you know, radio waves they've been percolating around the globe for, I don't know, 100 years at this point. It feels wholesome and cool. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I could definitely echo that feeling of walking into the studio and like seeing all the sliders, and you're just thinking like, oh my God, how am I going to manage all this? Especially, even though I did have previous radio experience, like this was kind of like a different avenue because it was more like interview style. And I'm like, oh man, I got to make sure their mic is turned on, because that would just be a nightmare if like, it's just like one person talking and you can't hear the other person. So that was so much fun to learn.
It's like an avant-garde artsy performance, the one-sided interview.
Yeah.
We could do that for a follow-up episode. So the other thing that you were talking about is, having grad students on and having this sort of familiarity with grad students that you see that you wouldn't normally necessarily meet. Certainly before I met you and the AlmaMAC and started doing that kind of thing, I knew a handful of people in my building, and that was basically it. And it felt like a very, very small campus. Um, but at this point, I've met people in all sorts of different departments, and I think that's made me a better researcher. Um, was that sort of part of the goal of starting the AlmaMAC, not just for you, but for other people who could be listening to sort of broaden horizons and whatnot?
Yeah, certainly. So that latter point that you mentioned, where I did intend for graduate students to become more connected with their community, because you never know who's listening, right? Somebody might listen and it's like, oh wow, like my friend does really similar research to this. That's so cool. I want to reach out to this person, and you never know where that connection can go. So it certainly was an avenue for networking for the guests. But that point you mentioned of where I got to know my fellow colleagues, that's something that was an unintended but welcomed outcome, I would say. It's certainly something I didn't expect for me to, for some of these individuals, like I've run into them multiple times in different avenues, because some people have said that because of their experience on this radio show, it motivated them to get more involved in public speaking initiatives or SciComm initiatives. So we've crossed paths multiple times, and that's been a really great experience out of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. The SciComm side is that's like a whole world that I didn't even really know was a thing until I came on the AlmaMAC the first time. And it's kind of just eaten up my whole life. It's
I've seen the tweets, Adam. I have seen the tweets.
you did this to me, I think.
No.
You changed my career trajectory. But I think now, like even more than ever, I think this whole SciComm grad students reaching out and showing off the kind of stuff they do seems so important. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of people listen to podcasts, and you often hear from these, big time researcher type people, and it might make science feel a little bit, I don't know, it kind of boosts that imposter feeling of like, okay, I'm not a tenured prof.
Mm.
These are the only people that, society wants to hear from. Grad students are just, working their way up. But yeah, I think this push of like SciComm and grad students getting involved and being like the face of science is such a cool thing. And it seems like you were kind of on that trail way before I even knew that was a thing that you could be on the trail of.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely learning a lot from you, Adam, when it comes to SciComms. So don't discount anything there. But yeah, I think that was another really cool thing, right? Because some people who are not involved in academia, they may not realize that it's really graduate students that are doing brunt of the work that you read about when those papers get published or when you see those press releases by universities. So I think it is very important to highlight the faces that are doing the work. And even from a career standpoint, right? Because those professors already have very nice jobs. So
Yeah.
if you highlight the graduate students that are doing the work, that's just another form of networking for them. And again, you don't know where that article or that press release, whose hands that could fall into. And I think a lot of students, I think they realize if those opportunities weren't presented to them, they're now taking that into their own hands, right? Just what you mentioned, whether it's like having a Twitter account and like tweeting about their work, which I think some people like listening might think like, well, not our listeners, but I think when you tell people like, oh yeah, like I did this really cool thread, or I learned this through Twitter, this and that, kind of, I don't know what you're feeling, but some people kind of just like look at me. It's like, what? Like, how is that a form of like information for you and like authentic, legitimate information? But I have found Twitter to do wondrous things for my learning. I've learned a lot of things that I otherwise, science or not, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things that I would not even think about otherwise. And that's why it's so important to diversify your feed and purposefully like choose who you follow, particularly if you want to like learn more about another topic. I've just found it to be so helpful.
Yeah. You always hear these things like, oh, Facebook and Twitter and all these social medias are so toxic, and there can be echo chambers. But if you do a good job of curating your feed, and there's different tips and tricks for doing this, I found it to be the most useful networking tool that I've ever used. It's great. I've met so many people. It's really cool.
Like a researcher can tweet an article that they recently published, and then that's like piques your interest, and then you can just message them or like comment, and then that conversation can like lead to an academic collaboration.
Yeah.
Like it's so simple, but it's just mind blowing, right? And I just wish that other people, including myself, like I just hope I continue like taking advantage of these opportunities.
Just today, so there's this guy who, this full tenured prof at Boston University that a couple of years ago I talked to and interviewed and wrote a little piece on
Nice.
his work. And he was a very friendly guy and a pretty cool guy. And I ended up meeting him at a conference, and we chatted for a bit. And we kind of stayed in touch. And just today on Twitter, I saw that he recorded a Pearl Jam cover, I think, on banjo, and was sharing it around. I don't know. It's just like fun little connections that you find that you probably wouldn't have found otherwise. Profs are people too. It's cool.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's another thing I was gonna say that you sort of brought up that reminded me of. Just sort of an aside. From times where I've tried to talk to profs and researchers, like from a journalism type standpoint, and from journalists that I've heard speak at panels, it's not always the easiest to find time for their schedules.
Okay.
And some, high profile researchers might begrudgingly talk to, journalists or people like that, or it's just difficult. Perfect opportunity to take grad students, right? So I think that's probably a better choice than getting these full tenured profs to do interviews. We should hear from more grad students rather than these, agreed?
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree that again, we do need to hear like a diverse set of voices. Why those particular professors may not be willing to reach out or like accept offers to display their work, I'm not sure. Like I would like jump at the opportunity to talk about my work, but certainly there might be some hesitancy because maybe they might have had like past experience of like their words being twisted, or nowadays there's this whole idea of weaponizing science and the spread of disinformation, right? So I guess some people have realized that it's very important how you word your words. How else to say that? I don't know. Word your words.
That's the perfect way to word
it. So yeah, it's now I'm thinking about before individuals talk to journalists or do some sort of press release, I wonder if they should get some training in how to talk to the media, because I feel like that is an art itself, right? Because as well-intentioned as a person might be, they might be really excited about their research and they may say some things that aren't entirely accurate. And I know that anyone can certainly make this mistake, right? It's not malicious. It's not a malicious intent. But yeah, I think there are also areas and opportunities that we can take advantage of where we like actually train on how to properly report and convey science, which I guess is the whole crux of science communication.
Yeah. There's a really cool article that came out on massivesci.com. I did like a peer review comment type thing, and it also sort of dovetailed into another interview during the summer, but I forget who I was talking to. They mentioned, so when I describe my science, I use a lot of analogies, like hands-on analogies to make things, a little bit more physical and make a little bit more sense. Yeah. But that can kind of be dangerous sometimes if you make the wrong sort of analogies. I think with what you said of like getting the training on how to speak to journalists and people out of your field, like you want to be careful when you use literary devices and things that they're not taken literally all the time. And this article was talking about, I forget exactly when last year, but there was some news story of like interesting particles emitted from the Arctic suggests that there might be parallel universes or something like that. And I was making the rounds in science journalism circles for a good month or so. And this article was basically a debunking of that and like a look into how that weird headline started. Like where was the source of misinformation that like created this little bubble, and then how did it blow up? It's very interesting. I'll link to that in the show notes, but yeah, I don't know. I think we should maybe have a course at McMaster on how to speak to journalists or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we wouldn't teach it, but somebody
No.
could.
Yeah. What a great idea. Yeah. Or some sort of like, I don't want to call it mandatory training because some people might scoff at that idea. And I understand it's just another set of Zoom meetings to add to your calendar. But yeah, or some sort of guide, right? Or at least be
Yeah.
aware that
Yeah,
the
some
words you
best
say.
practices and whatnot.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is so being on campus radio, which we are, and if you're listening to this, it's probably on campus radio. I think 90% of students and people that are on campus are undergrads. Do you think that I think like 10% of students are grad students or something like that. That's a stat I think I heard when I was doing volunteer work for our student union or our TA union. But I think there's some usefulness in having grad students talk about their research as like the next step for undergrads. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if undergrads are really keen and they want to learn more about research and what a career in science looks like, I think grad students are the place to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was another thing I intended with this sort of radio station or this radio show rather, because I feel like if you don't have an older sibling or if you don't have a peer that has gone on to grad school or even has volunteered in research, you don't really know what that entails, right? Because I remember being in first or second year and people said, oh yeah, I want to get involved in research and stuff. And I just kind of jumped on that bandwagon, right? But I'm like, what does this mean? Like getting involved in research. And to be honest, I still kind of have that feeling when some of my PhD colleagues say like, oh yeah, I want to get involved in industry. Like I'm going into the industry after this. And I'm like, what is the industry, right? Like, tell me. So I think it's definitely difficult if you don't have role models or that source of information. So that's something I wanted to do with this radio show. And we did get into kind of people's paths and their stories and narratives into how they joined grad school. And I think what I appreciated the most is, and it's difficult to do, but what I appreciated the most is when guests talked about their failures or kind of how their path wasn't 100%, linear, and it was they had to like experiment. So because I think that shows to people that you got to try multiple things, you got to fail multiple times before you actually figure out what you like. And you might realize that out of a research opportunity or something like, hey, research is not for me. And that is completely okay. At least you realized it early before you signed up for something. So I think stories like these are really important because I think far too often we just see that PhD at the end of the name, right? And we don't know what led to that. We don't know the obstacles that people faced, maybe the different career paths that they took to get there, the decisions that they made. So I think showcasing those types of stories are also really important.
Yeah. I like what you said about if you don't have like a sibling or like a parent that went through higher education. If you're a first generation student, there's so little for you to grab onto. It can be so difficult if you don't have like a big brother type person carrying you along. And I don't know, if this show can be like that to somebody, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. Not the Orwellian Big Brother though.
No, I guess not.
Yeah.
Yeah, not Orwellian. Let's just do friendly Big Brother, a nice one.
Friendly Big Brother. Yeah.
Possibly controversial. I think maybe if this show convinces somebody to get into grad school or convinces somebody to not go to grad school, I think those are equally good outcomes.
Completely agree. Because at the end of the day, you want to be doing something, and this sounds so simple, but you gotta do something that you love, right? Mm-hmm. And I admit it's really difficult to figure out what you like and don't like if you don't go through certain experiences or have opportunities presented to you. Totally get that. And I feel that. But once you realize like, hey, this thing is not for me, that's as good as realizing, hey, this thing is for me.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could.
Yeah,
couldn't
grad
agree
school
more.
is like such a big, long, expensive experiment if you're not sure that you want a PhD by the time you come out of it. And I feel bad
Yeah.
for our American grad students who usually just get dropped into a PhD right out of their undergrad. It's not really within their culture to do a master's first. Usually it's just you sign on for 6 years right out of undergrad. Yeah, for every person that I know that like completely switched their trajectory out of their master's and like finished a master's and went on to a completely different PhD. I don't know how you do that in the States. I don't know how those people do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, this show can be like a little bit of a stepping stone, a little trial before you start the master's. The master's can be a trial before you start your PhD, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we owe it to individuals that are entering grad school that they're kind of aware of what potential opportunities that may exist for them, right? Because here's another statistic that I'm not 100% sure about, but I've heard that only 10% of PhDs go into academia and the rest go into the industry. And that's not because of preference, that's just because of the level of competitiveness. There are simply not enough academic positions for the number of PhDs that are graduating every year. And as somebody that wants to go into academia, that's really disheartening to hear, right? So absolutely, I think it's important that you do your research before committing to something that takes a really long time to do and is really difficult and is made 10 times more difficult if you're not enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, big time. All right. So you are a researcher. You speak from experience.
Yes.
And
We're in it, Adam.
You're probably going through one of the hardest years for being a researcher, depending on subject and whatnot. And you've never spoken about your research on the show before, have you?
No, I have never been on the other side of the mic. So here we are.
I think this is the day.
This is the day here. I'm not gonna lie, I've been putting it off for some time because I've been a bit nervous. But here I am in the hot seat now.
Putting it off since 2016.
Yeah.
No longer. Anyway, that's it for this week. Tune in next week to hear about the dual MD PhD program Sawayra is working towards. And thanks again to Sawayra for being on the show and, well, for everything, I guess. Follow her on Twitter at SeeingAway. If you like the show, check out the other stuff we have going on at scientificcanada.ca. And if you want to help support additional content from early career researchers, you can help us by joining us on Patreon. Even $1 a month goes a long way, but hey, we could always use a little bit more. So, thanks again, and I'll see you next week.